So analysis on the fragmentation. Again, step back here, pivot table. You want to know how the spending, total spending of a category is fragmented among different suppliers. So our unit of analysis again the single categories, and what you have to do is to understand how the spending is fragmented among the different suppliers. So here you see that for the civil DB IA, these 11 million are split in this way. You see that suppliers are already in from the largest to the smallest, but this is the fragmentation. You can also put the categories in order. See, if you put here in the pivot table from sort largest to smallest, you have already in order from the most important to the less important ones in terms of spending. There is also a smarter way to represent this value, because you maybe not be interested in understanding the total value, but you want the percentage. Please don't calculate it one by one, because there is a smarter way. So you reselect amount in dollar and you put it here. Again, here you see now you have the same column, and again you put information and you say that you want to show this data not like row like this, but you want them, there are a bunch of options, but you want a percentage of grand total. If you click OK, you see that this is the fragmentation. So per facility SMER, which account for 80.28% of the total spending, this 8.28% is split in this way among the different suppliers. So you see how much supplier counts for the category and for the whole organization. If you don't want percentage of the grand total, you can also display results here by choosing to be displayed as a percentage of per round total, so it makes the incidence on this 8.28%. But again, this is now useful for then the next step, which is try to understand which is the suitable category strategy to be defined, and which is the actual strategy implemented according to what we have analyzed so far.
Because remember that we are still in the spend analysis phase, so you are still unable to take decision or like being able to affirm if purchasing management in our company is good or bad. But we have collected a series of data that are useful for us to start making some consideration. In particular, fragmentation analysis, as I told you, is the trade union between the analysis and then the decision-making phase, where we will classify the spending, when we'll define the strategy, understand and if we are aligned with this strategy, because it's able to give you a preliminary understanding of how the company approach purchasing management across the different categories. In particular, besides the technical aspect on how to build and how to design the fragmentation analysis that we have just discussed, in this version enriched with some data that we have also seen in class, we have discussed that according to this fragmentation analysis, you can understand how the total spending of a category is fragmented among the different suppliers in the category, and in this way you can see if there are some categories that are more fragmented, like this one. Look at this one. This one, which is the most important one because it's the one with the largest spending, has a total spending of $42 million, and it has 81 suppliers, where the first 11 makes 31 million, and the other 70 make the remaining part, which is 1/4 of that. So here you see an high fragmentation. Where like the most spending is concentrated among the first 11 supplier, and like the remaining one, especially look at that, the last one have just some peanuts volume in terms of spending, which we still don't know yet, but again, we still like make us thinking that it's not unreasonable to reasonable to address so many suppliers to give them such a lower volume. And then again, if you scroll down, you can see that the situation is like this in almost all the categories. Like, look at that, for technical FTOM, 33 million, 3 suppliers having 23, and then the remaining 40 splitting the 9 million remaining, which is again a very high fragmentation, especially if you look like at the left tail one. You have 12 supplier for which like you spend no more than 100,000, so which is a very few percentage compared to the total spending. In particular, you see here that the last one are the one that are giving a very few amount of spending. Situation is better for some category, like this one, for example, have less supplier, where like the spending is more concentrated, but still like you have supplier this and this that are not homogeneous compared to the other one. So according to the fragmentation analysis, you can start understanding if there is like a rational way, or if there is like a common trend that you are using to manage the supply base in each category. And as we have discussed yesterday, in the case of Crown Insurance, personally, the feelings that you should have is that there is like a random manage of supplier, because again, you see that how spending is split among supplier doesn't follow a clear path, but it's more like we have some trustful supplier for each category, and then we address randomly the other one according to the different side that the supplier is able to like look at, for example, at consulting and Air ALBA. So that's another example. You have one main supplier. So out of 27 million of dollar, you ask ITSA 15, 80 million. So 80 million. %67 of the spending is concentrated in this supplier, and then you see a series of 27 suppliers that are addressed just for the remaining part. So makes sense, we don't know, but of course this is a weird behavior that for sure like doesn't allow the company to reach efficiency in the purchasing process. Why? Because yesterday we have discussed that managing a supplier, so including a supplier in a supply base, is not cost-free for your company. In particular, there is like an empirical rule determined by McKinsey. McKinsey is a consultancy company that has spread these very general and not specific and not mathematical and not like very precise rules, that if you want to understand how much the management of each supplier costs to your company, you need to apply these rules. So you multiply 0.95% of your total spending, which for Crown Insurance is, if you go to the category ABC, here it is 5,017,600,000, blah, blah, blah. You multiply this value by 95% and you divide it by the number of suppliers that for Crown Insurance is 975. So for Crown Insurance, the management, the very general, the average of the management of the supplier cost you $5,096. Okay, so it means that for every supplier For managing a supplier in your company, according to the process cost, the administrative cost, the people involved, you spend on average this amount of dollar. Okay, if you count among the supply base the supplier that have a value of spending, so the amount of spending that you made with the supplier lower than this value, you find that 12 supplier are below this threshold, which again is ridiculously low. I mean, I hope that you understand that, like, we spend 500 million of dollar, and we are just looking at the supplier with which I'm spending less than the cost of managing them, which is still a ridiculous low amount of money. But we still see that 1/4 almost of our supplier are called loss supplier. Are called loss supplier, meaning that our supplier that for which we are spending more in managing the relationship than the value that we are buying from them. Again, this tells nothing about if you're doing good, bad, but of course this make you arise some question mark that you should keep for the next step of the category, the definition and the assessment of the category management strategy. As I told you in class, this fragmentation analysis can also be reversed, so you cannot just understand which type of category, for which type of category the spending is fragmenting among the different supplier, but you can also do the opposite. You see, you take the supplier, so you do a pivot table where we take a supplier and you understand which type of category each supplier supply for your company. In this case, you see that the pivot table show you how the 45 million of dollar that you buy from ETS A15 are split among the different categories that the supplier provide. And also in this case, you can see that there are very few like mono-category supplier. This is one, ACNO43, but if you scroll down, your area truck 21, Almia 11, so there are very few suppliers that are just mono-category, which again means that the company doesn't seem to have a clear strategy in managing the supply base, and so of course when we will have to like review the strategy of managing the category and managing the supply base, there will be a lot of opportunities to revise the actual situation.